Shalom, everybody. Chag Shavuot Sameach. My name is Roy Yamin, and I'm the department's head of delegation to North America. As you know, we chose to focus our Torah study of this Tikkun Shavuot in the greatest figures of the Bible, the ones that inspired the Zionist movement from its early beginning, and the ones that still inspire us today. And I chose to focus my Zionist from Torah part in a figure that intuitively was supposed to be one of the top 5 of the Bible, but from reasons that I would like to elaborate today, is actually pushed aside from our collective memory. And I'm talking about the figure of Prophet Joshua, Yoshua bin Nun. It's pretty surprising to understand that Joshua was there from the beginning. In the book of Shemot, Exodus, he's been commanded by Moses to go and fight the Amalek. And he's the only person that walking to escort Moses before he's leaving to Mount Sinai. In the book of Bamidbar, Numbers, he's one of the 2 spies that coming back and giving us an accurate image of the situation in the land of Canaan. And in the book of Dvarim, he's been appointed by Moses in front of the people of Israel as his successor. Moses is telling him, "Be strong and courageous, for you must go with these people into the land that the Lord swore to their ancestors to give them, and you must divide it among them as their inheritance." So how come we don't really remember Joshua like we do remember other leaders of the Bible? Well, I would like to claim that the close relationship between Joshua and Moses were probably the biggest tragedy of Joshua's career. It seems like Joshua was living always the comparison to Moses, and let's be honest, we can't avoid it as well. A lot of it's because of the author of the Bible and because of the self-doubts of Joshua. It's really hard not to wonder if those years in the desert actually made him and prepared him to this significant role. And apparently, you know what? We are not the only one that being concerned. On the very first talk between God and Joshua, when the name of Moses is being mentioned like every 2 seconds, the prophet gets an intensive coaching talk by God and some very, very specific instructions. God promises him that I'll never leave you, I'll never abandon you. And not less than 3 times telling him, be strong and courageous, chazak ve'ematz, chazak ve'ematz, chazak ve'ematz, in order to uplift his spirit. It seems that God is a little bit concerned that although Joshua is coming with a great record of achievements, he's lacking some of the spirituality of Moses. And God is not willing to take any risk and commanding Joshua to go and be aware to the Torah that was given to Moses, to go and study it every day and every night. Ironically for me, the figure of Joshua reminded me another figure on Israel's history, answering the name of Moses. And this is Israel's second prime minister, Moshe Sharet. Sharet started his term in a situation that considered to be the worst nightmare of every prophet, president, prime minister, every leader, while his predecessor, David Ben-Gurion, was alive and had a lot of influence on Israel's politics. Looking back, although Sharet has many achievements and contributed a lot to the history of Zionism, it's really hard to remember what were his greatest reforms or what were his, iconic speeches. He was always in the shade of David Ben-Gurion. And it seems like Sharet also has some self-doubts because of Ben-Gurion. And he wrote in his journal, for example, that it was not for me to lead this country. But just like Sharet, we know that Joshua also wrote a journal that's describing us and giving us a different image, because Joshua was managed to govern. He was actually gained the support of the people and led the people of Israel to go and conquer the land of Canaan. And we are witnessing great miracles during the term of Joshua. We know that he worked really often to connect the people to God and was also very successful in dividing the land between the tribes. But still, the similarity and the comparison to Moses is there all the time. The situation that happened to Joshua are pretty similar to the situation that happened to Moses. And every victory that Joshua is having is always being framed as a result to the promises that were given in the desert. And for me, it seems to be the relationship between Moses and Joshua are the relationship between an idea to its practice, ben halacha lemaseh, like a guru and his very loyal follower. But if, like myself, you're looking for some victories of Joshua on Moses, there is one that is very iconic. In the miracle, when Joshua is stopping the moon and the sun from moving, is the only case in the history of the Bible when a man is actually commanding on a miracle and God follows. Nobody was able to do it, not even Moses. And this is one of the rare victories of Joshua. And you know what? I'm willing to take it. Regarding to Zionism, the Zionist movement took a lot of inspiration by the figure of Joshua and by the story of his generation. From the very early the very early Zionists, for them the book of Joshua was the story that they wish for themselves, a story of people of slaves that came back to their land, conquered it, and creating life, creating a nation on it. But we do know that Zionism, the ethos, the mainstream ethos of Zionism, is been changing during the years. A lot of it thanks to, competing narratives in Israel. And I would like to give one example for that regarding, related to the topic of Joshua. Shulamit Aloni was one of the lead voices of the left in Israel during the 80s and 90s. And when she was appointed as the Minister of Education, she had a statement that she gave a statement that she's totally against the studying of the book of Joshua in schools. Aloni claimed that there is a lot of cruelty in the book of Joshua, what it can corrupt the students of Israel. And she was actually supported by a lot of artists and by a lot of leftist scholars, like the writer Samech Izhar, who wrote about the book of Joshua this quote. This Joshua, it is hard to understand him, and it's man's obligation to be against him. Only if this is a warning text, a text trying to tell us to be aware. This is what happens to a people that conquer other people's land, even if it's from the best reasons. And you know what? For me, it's interesting. Dafka, the pale figure of Joshua, the one that was described as the face of the moon while Moses is the face of the sun, this figure is actually still elaborating a moral debate in Israel about this land. His action and his choices are the one that still make us wonder about, the morality of our fighting, how we do protect ourselves, and where do we choose to live in Israel, or where do we choose to withdraw, from which areas we choose to withdraw in Israel. And I'm taking another lesson from Joshua. I think we can take a great lesson about leadership from Joshua. In our current political reality, when every celeb is running for presidency and every politician with no political experience claims to be the next prime minister, we can learn a lot from this modest prophet. This is a person who stood on the side of another leader, writing notes, learning from it, and being also modest enough to give him the credit afterwards. We are lacking this modesty in our leadership in Israel and in leadership all around the world. And although I'm not a huge fan of Joshua's drastic modesty, I think it's amazing that in his quiet way, with no PR and running about the next positive headline, he was managed to create an incredible change in Israel, an incredible change for his people, and a change that was also very inspiring for a political movement that was established 3,000 years after his lifetime. I really wish us all to live under a leader that will spend day and night going and studying their Torah, their principles, their values, and that are being working from the sense of shlichut, like the prophet Joshua. Thank you very much. V'chag Shavuot Sameach.